15th of May, 1944. My darling, we appear to be on the move again. I cannot say for where, however I suspect this will be my last letter for some time. We have been mobilized out into the countryside around a number of airfields. I suspect, as do we all, that we are getting ready for some great push. I can only hope I have my men ready and prepared for the battlefield. Hey, welcome to Valhalla Games Podcast. So, enjoy this episode. This is Dan and Rex. It's 15th of May, 2019. We're at D-22 for the 75th anniversary celebration. So join us as we talk about our time-critical projects leading up to the commemoration. Also, enjoy the main content of this podcast, which is regarding the sealing of your miniatures and terrain. In particular, the varnishes used, and we go out on a limb. We've tested some products so that you don't have to. Please listen in, as usual. Like, share, and subscribe it. Please share it with others. But please share your ideas with us as well, because especially on the case of the varnish and stuff that we talk about, what you suggest to us can help others. Thanks very much. Enjoy your listening.
Love it here. Gentlemen, the day we've been waiting for has arrived. Invasion! We're on our way.
General, the orders have been given. It's on.
Have the battalion commanders join me in the wardroom.
Aye, sir.
All right, Sergeant. You men are the eyes of our airborne army. You, the Pathfinders, will have one job, and one job only: to light the drop zones for our paratroops. Together with the British and the Canadian Pathfinders, you will be the first fighting men to land in France. And remember this: when you get to Normandy, you'll only have one friend: God. And this.
Yeah, hi Dan, how you going?
Good. How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. I just thought I'd give you a call to catch up on what's all going on in your world. And hey, I thought we might record it as well, make it into a podcast. Do you think that makes good podcast sense, or do you think that we're just going to drone on with our old boring stuff and nobody's going to be very interested?
Waldorf and Statler say that it couldn't make any worse.
Well, that is true. So, funnily enough, because we haven't spoken for a week or more, I've got lots to talk about, lots of news, lots happening in the wargaming front. Did you want to start, or do you want me to get a few things off my chest?
No, you go for it. You look like you're aching to tell me. Go on.
Yeah. So it's a wargaming fiesta right now. So lots and lots of things coming up. So obviously topical for May 2019, but some of it will carry over into future years as well. Warlord D-Day releases, Warlord web campaign, so that's very exciting. So we might come back and talk about that in a minute. Moab for this year, so that's the mother of all battles, being held down in Sydney each year. So there's a couple of things happened on that. That's starting to get going. So I want to chat about that as well. Brian Cook, who was the author / team leader / the guy that wrote the recent campaign Budapest book,
Yep.
is having a campaign day. So did you see that on Facebook?
Yeah, exciting.
And I'm planning to go. I've got the royal tick on that. So yeah, quite a bit to talk about that, armies and all sorts, and lots of other releases and things going on as well. So Do you want to give me that's some stuff that I want to chat about anyway. Do you want to start on some of your stuff, or should we rip into some of the things that are going on?
All right, well, why don't we, I guess, why don't we start off by talking about D-Day? You go for it.
Yeah, so D-Day, it's the 75th anniversary this year of D-Day, isn't it?
Correctamundo.
Yep, so big D-Day celebrations worldwide, commemorations, thanks to the guys that went and did the job and kept our country free and all that sort of stuff. And that, that's a serious thing. But on the flip side of it, great gaming, great opportunities for, Saving Private Ryan, running up the beach at Normandy, and all those classic kind of events that we think about when we start thinking about World War II, which for us at the moment, bolt action is probably our poison of choice, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, as I say, like, it's a very, really serious thing, and a big commemoration, but exciting and fun to think about from a wargamer's point of view. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so as part of that, as part of me wanting to build my bocage table and starting to think about buying a couple of new gaming mats, I've got a bunch of emails from Warlord Games talking about D-Day stuff. So they've released a couple of new products. There's a D-Day boxed battle set. Have you seen that one?
Yes, that's the one you posted up on our blog, and you kindly sort of informed a few people it was coming out the very first day it was sort of released, the information on it.
Yeah, got a bit of a scoop on that one actually. For some reason, I just happened to be there. I don't know, maybe I was the first guy maybe I was up late and I was the first guy to see the email or something. But I posted on valhallagames.net and then just shared that out to a couple of the Bolt Action Facebook groups, and we got 1,800 hits in about 2 hours, so that was good. That certainly generated a bit of interest, and Warlord teased it a bit too. They didn't actually tell us what it was. All we really saw was the box art with the more information to follow. So that was interesting as well.
Yeah, very GW-esque, and then when they finally did release the contents too, that information was eagerly devoured by everybody. So German late war grenadiers and the new US infantry box sprues, I do believe, along with some scenery. Yeah.
So that'll be good for those that don't have those armies already. I heard a few people sort of saying, well, is it a starter set? And I guess the answer is no, because it doesn't have a rule book. Because the starter sets all have a mini rule book, don't they?
Yeah. I think that's the intent. Yeah, I think I think if you played it right, it'd be a pretty tenacious starter thing, playing against pillboxes and stuff like that. So I think if anyone's listening, I think if it could be a starter set in so much as I think if you removed pillboxes and maybe the one-sided tank, then off the other side, off the Americans, I think the infantry forces would be quite even and sort of opposite. Yeah. But apart from that, I think it'd probably be fairly tenacious and a lot of rules to get into to start with. Pillboxes are pretty hardcore.
Yeah, and I think the starter set too is great for starter sets, but if you've been playing Desert War or Winter War or Russians and Germans or whatever, and you don't have any US, it is a great opportunity to be able to buy that box, which is kind of a battle in a box, hence the name, without having to spend the extra expense to get essentially to get the rulebook that you don't need. So yeah, I think it's quite good to have modular sets, and then if you need a rulebook, well, yeah, you buy one. If you need some dice, well, you buy that too. Rather than necessarily getting everything in one box, which works well for some people and some situations. So yeah, horses for courses, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. But it's exciting anyway. It's exciting stuff. So.
Yeah, so as well as that, they released a bit of a teaser at this point anyway, from the date of recording, and I'll read it out to you. Warlord Games presents a 3-month-long web-based campaign that draws on our 3 major game systems: Bolt Action, Blood Red Skies, and Cruel Seas, based on the actual events in the run-up to Operation Neptune and on the liberation of Paris. This campaign will be driven partly by the narrative of the historical detail and by you, the gamer, for more details. Blah blah blah. So yeah, that sounds quite interesting. So I've joined that Facebook campaign page, or whatever you like to call it, and I'll be eagerly awaiting the outcome of that to find out how that's all going to work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, back in the days of the old GW global campaigns, which were pretty cool, and they've just sort of done another one. You tend to sort of play your game, send in some sort of evidence-based thing, or just how your game went, and then they log results and sort of map the results accordingly. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to just basically having some more excitement around all the games that people play in our community, and getting more pictures and stuff up on the net. So anything that just keeps us all excited has got to be a great thing.
Yeah, that's right. I have often, I think we spoke a couple of episodes ago about my lust for a Kriegspiel type of thing. That's how you say it, isn't it? Kriegspiel?
Kriegspiel, yep, that's the one.
Okay. It's got the spit in there. You got to get the spit, otherwise it's not quite
Spiel.
right.
Like Zug.
Right.
A tank Zug.
Okay. So the idea being that, you got guys in different rooms of your venue playing out different things, be it, being it in this situation would be a Blood Red Skies, Cruel Seas thing. And I'm thinking a Flames of War-esque type thing with that sort of scale, 1 to 100 scale. And then in other rooms, you've got linked games that are playing out the results of those. So, these guys, these tanks move forward and, engage these guys, and, we moved into this town. Now let's fast forward to the bolt action room where guys are going to play out that game, and it's basically give the results as to whether the tanks, the 1/100 scale tanks, can then roll over onto the next town, or whether they have to fall back or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that would be a massive undertaking, and you worry that things are going to get bogged down and people are going to be waiting for other people. So perhaps it only makes sense in my mind. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I think that'd be really good in clubs. One of those club situations where you have players who are absolutely fixed on one game system and are not interested in another system for whatever reason. They just don't like the rules, or they don't want the cost to buy into another scale or whatever. And as you just said, I think Flames of War and maybe Bolt Action come to mind. And they lend themselves to that. That's exciting stuff.
I'm thinking, that movie recently, Dunkirk, and the line in that, which has been talked about plenty of times before. Where were you, or something? That was the line in reference to the air support. And in reality, apparently the air support was actually there, but they were further inland trying to prevent the planes from actually attacking on the beach. Once they got to the beach, wasn't much point hanging around shooting them in amongst all the guys, but they were actually inland protecting them from that. But they didn't, of course, realize that. But in my Kriegspiel game, I'm thinking, the result of that game depends on how many planes actually end up coming into bolt action, and whether your forward air observers, can call in guys, or, whether your artillery can call in support from a land thing or something like that. Yeah, I get really excited about the idea, but I think you'd need a big club, and you'd need to be right onto the logistics of how it was all going to work. So, but back to our slight digression, back to the Warlord games. One, I'll be looking forward to that, to see what depth it goes into, and hopefully play a couple of games that contribute to that once I get my my US guys at least assembled, if I can do it before then.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, you've got some armies to put on the table already. You've got your Germans. You can be running through the Bocage as your Fallschirmjäger, 6th FJR, I do believe, and you've got your commandos as well. So yeah, you're ready to rock.
Yeah. Well, speaking of building new armies, Dan, I'll come onto a new army that I might be thinking about soon, because obviously you can't finish an army without going on to another 3. But you've been hard at work, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I've been doing some stuff. I've been doing some stuff to an existing army. Those people who've been following us on our YouTube channel, um, and listen to the last podcast, so it'll all be linking together. So, in reference to the D-Day 75th, we have got at the Christchurch Wargaming Club here in New Zealand. We've got one of our esteemed members, oldest and finest members, Tony's organised a D-Day sort of mega games, if you like, and he has organised it in the same room or different ends of the room or whatever for 15mm flames of war, and then also bolt action at the far end as well. I believe he's got some reenactors and stuff turning up in uniforms and a bit of displays and stuff there too, so public can really come and be immersed in the event. So I'm playing the General Windy Gale, I suppose. I'm in charge of the 6th Airborne Division, and he has given us, a set army list to go to, which I have no problem with whatsoever, because it makes for his scenario, his vision, so that's all good. And I've just got a lot of riflemen and some LMGs and stuff I needed to add to my squads, as opposed to, I've got quite a few SMGs in my squads at the moment. So Brit Paras, I've got 23 on my table that I'm batch painting all in one batch, which is just riveting. You can see that on the YouTube channel. I've just done all the green patches on the Denison smocks, so tomorrow I'll be doing all the brown patches on the Denison smocks, I guess, or the first ones. I'm gradually getting there, getting ready for a wash. So, yeah, so that's one. The other one is just because, you got to have something else going on. I've been doing some Soviet tanks, so that'll keep me busy.
Right, okay, Soviet tanks.
Yeah.
When are you planning to use those then?
I am planning to use those whenever we can deconflict our lives and meet up and have a game. But
I'm pumping you for a date as to when you're going to come over and visit, don't you? You know the purpose of that question.
Yeah. I'm betting.
Be alright if I paid for you.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
what you're saying is, because I've been seeing your information about, a Soviet army. Oh, you need more Soviets, Brian Cook, for your Fortress Budapest Day, don't you?
Yeah, I may have dropped that hint. I certainly dropped it to gaming buddy Nathan, but it's just been crickets from that angle. But I noticed that you haven't chimed in any more than a like.
Well, I as you know, I'm fairly busy. I haven't even checked that date. I've so on a structure in the army, and our current batch of trainees has got 1 week left to go. In fact, we're in the final week, and it's all gone well, but I'm pretty tired. The batteries are running on empty, so I haven't even looked at those dates and seen where I'm at or whatever. What are the dates, Rex?
6th of July. Just a 1 day thing. Not suggesting you come across. I'm just ribbing you to see if I can generate any interest.
6th of July. Haven't even looked. But yeah, I'll have a look. But at this stage,
I think I'm due to probably come to Christchurch. It would probably be the if you're keeping score, but we'll just have to see how we go.
Yeah. I don't know. Look, Brian's thing sounds really exciting. The book's fantastic.
So let's talk about that a little bit, actually. This was posted on Bolt Action Australia New Zealand website and Facebook site, should I say. And what it says, let me actually find it so I can tell you what it actually says. So it goes like this. Fellas, I'm putting together a campaign day event in Sydney in July. The idea is to set up a number of scenarios from the Fortress Budapest book, as much as terrain and armies allow. If you're keen to join, let me know in the comments and we can start organising and see what we can pull off. So yeah, there's a few guys replied to that. So 6th of July 2019. And it's at Padstow, which is kind of southwest Sydney. So yeah, it looks really nice. And he's got a beautiful photo there of some of his terrain. One of the photos taken with his terrain and armies from the actual Fortress Budapest's book, which has been released only this year. So yeah, looking forward to going down there and definitely getting an eye full of those miniatures. And so then the question is, of course, what army am I going to take? Because I don't see anything about Fallschirmjäger in there.
So, yeah. So what are you going to do?
Well, I've got my 8th Army in the desert. Is there any of those in there? No, okay. All right. It's fine. I've got my British Commandos. Is there any of those in there?
So we're exhausting all possibilities except for get out those winter Germans and start painting them.
Yeah. So there's winter Germans in the box, right? So they're on the sprue, they're in the box, they're looking lovely and pristine. All they need is a good sprue wash, and then we'll be going.
Boo for sprue washing.
Team Rex, wash your sprues. But then if I was going to do that, it seems like everybody who's replied's gone, yeah, I'll bring my Germans, I'll bring my Gebers, whatever they're called, and or I'll bring my this or I'll bring my that. And so he's really short on Soviets. So if I have to paint something anyway, well, maybe I should be a nice guy and paint some Soviets and bring those. Because, hey, it's only another $100 worth of miniatures to put together a small army. I've already got a T-34.
So what you're saying is I should send you my Soviets and you can paint them. Ha!
No, I'm not up to that task. No, sorry. But I could buy some and I could paint them. And that way, when I paint up I have to buy winter ones, of course, because this Fortress Budapest thing is around the time. Actually, funnily enough, I just read through the book yesterday, and it's in between or around the. Okay, I'll try that again. He puts in the book that while the British powers were dropping into Arnhem,
yep,
this campaign was kicking off in Hungary. And then he goes on a little bit later to say, while the Germans were trying to attack through the Ardennes at the Battle of the Bulge, this was still going on. So clearly it's a wintertime thing. So,
okay, well we have to remember that. So September, the starting of September. So yes, it's technically start of autumn, but it's still quite hot. So you could have mixed troops for the initial start of it, and which is a lot of the Soviet sort of. So, for instance, we picked up the Battle for Berlin box. Haha! I've got a mix of summer and winter clothing. It has to be said that when you look at a lot of Soviet pictures and that, a lot of them are still wearing the quilted jackets and that, even in the sort of hot Kursky sort of thing, you still see them in it. I think they sort of ended up with whatever they ended up with, so long as it's not extremes, of course. Running along in greatcoats in the middle of the Battle of Kursk, but a bit of the quilted clothing is, or just a jacket of the quilted clothing is not too crazy.
Yeah, so for me, it's all about the bases. What are you going to put on the base? Is it going to be rubble or snow and rubble or grass, or that's a big decision, Dan. That's a huge decision that I have to make. So my thought pattern goes a little bit like this, right? So you can see there's a little bit of justification in here by the tone of my voice already. So you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, man. I'm ready. You to explain this purchase.
Yep. So if I was to buy a box of winter Soviets,
yep,
right, and paint those up for this event, which I don't necessarily even want them. I don't even like wargaming. I'm only doing it out of the goodness of my heart, just to balance the event. So just to be clear.
Yeah, and as a tribute to the fine men of the forces that fell there, you'll take one for the team.
Yes.
Yep.
So I could do that, and because it's a city-based campaign, a lot of it, I could do some of them with with the grassy or rocky or whatever terrain on their bases, and then I could do some with the with an urban type basis, similar to what you've done, really nice bricks and stuff. So, and then I'd sort of have an army that, that was winter war, and then I've already got my winter Germans, which is still in the box. So if I ever get them painted up, well, maybe I could put them with a bit of urban terrain as well, and then we could do a Stalingrad sort of thing or something like that. So
Sounds good.
I'm thinking that it could be an option, because otherwise, if I have one winter army, and by the way, did you know that I actually bought another box of Germans for the desert, just so you know, because otherwise I wouldn't have anything to play with my 8th army. But that's another whole story. But so if I was to buy some Soviets, then I could have 2 winter armies that could face off, and I think that would be good. It would be a good plan. What do you think?
I think it sounds like a solid plan. I think both your financial advisor and your wife will be happy with that.
All right, well, that's probably all we need to say about that then. So if you're listening to this podcast in 2019, before July, go and have a look at Brian Cook's Fortress Budapest Campaign Day. You can find it on the Facebook Bold Action Australia New Zealand, or and I'm sure you do a web search, you'll come up with it as well. And support him. I think it'll be a great opportunity to meet the author of the book, and to play some great games, see some great minis, and being a campaign day, it's going to be a little bit different to my only other kind of drive down to Sydney experience, which was a tournament/event. I think it'll be interesting. That's
true, and I heard him flippantly mention in one of the comments that he was going to have goulash there.
He did mention that. I don't know if that's true or not, but I consider that it's in writing, so I consider that.
I was going to send through a meme of Gandalf going, "Don't tempt me, Frodo," but goulash. Ooh, a good goulash.
Being from Australia and New Zealand, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? But being from Australasia, how about that? We don't get a lot of goulash here. At least we didn't when we were growing up, did we, Dan?
I think you're wrong, actually, because I remember having goulash.
Oh, okay. I always thought it was
a spicy stew with more tomatoes in it is what I'm thinking of.
Okay, I thought it was just like a thing, like I don't know how to describe it, like what we would call a meme today or something like that. That it wasn't even a proper word. And then when I went to the Czech Republic on holiday one year, I went into this local store and the guy didn't speak any English, but man, he had goulash, so I ate it and it was good.
Yeah, goulash is lovely,
and it was really a real thing.
And on the food thing, Brian Cook's tempted me twice, because now he's holding it in Padstow, right? And when I hear Padstow, I saw Padstow, because Padstow in Cornwall in the UK, for those of you listening to this in the UK, if we in fact have anybody listening to us anywhere, right? Padstow is where Rick Stein, the seafood chef, has his little restaurant, and then just across the bay from that, just across the little waterfront, there is a Cornish pasty shop that touts having 100 different flavours of Cornish pasties. So I had all these emotions of goulash and then Cornish pasties. So, man, if I came, just better follow through with some sort of goulash and or pasty-based treat.
Do you know I've already checked the flight prices for you on that time?
Oh, man, how much?
I can't remember now. Around the 300, so...
Probably less than it cost me to get from Christchurch to Whangarei. So, yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, we've probably babbled on enough about that. What was the purpose of this podcast
about goulash and Cornish pasties?
Yeah.
Mixed with wargaming, of course.
Yeah, that's right. So we're holding him to goulash. So enough said about that.
Yeah.
All right. So that's D-Day, Warlord, a little bit of D-Day from you, which sounds fantastic, by the way. So if you're in Christchurch, do yourself a favour, get along down to that, even if it's just for a look. So it'll be a public spectacle as much as anything, correct?
Yes, it's at the Woolston Club, Woolston Workingmen's Club in Christchurch, and they've got some really big rooms down below that we have our events and our wargaming events. It's a really well presented place, plenty of food and everything like that too at a really great price. So, yeah, if you are a wargamer, haven't got to the club yet, or you've been away from the club for a wee while, but somehow you managed to be listening to this and get along.
Yeah, well, if we get enough people, Dan, from the Australia, that's the land of the long brown smear. If we get enough people, just send me an email at rex@valhallagames.net and we'll charter a plane there. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, so we only need 400 people. So let me know. Drop me an email.
Yep.
We'll be there. All right, probably not. All right, so a couple of other little bits of news. Henry Hyde wrote a book. He's a
Henry Hyde.
author.
He's a fairly well known wargamer, isn't he? You could say he's fairly well known to one or two of us.
So Henry Hyde wrote the book on miniature wargaming, the Wargaming Compendium. It's called, and what it is basically that it's a compendium. It talks about the history of it, how it came about, the mechanics, some game systems, and includes a couple of little rule sets in it. It talks about painting, modelling, terrain, and I think it's 800 pages or something like that. It's a really serious book and fairly expensive as well. I have the ebook of it. You've seen it, haven't you, Dan?
Yep, I sure have. Really good book, and he's basically wargaming alumni / royalty, really.
Yeah. So some of his stuff, I think he has a wide breadth of content and experience. So he sort of talks about, back in the old days, the floor varnish and make sure you dip your metal miniatures overnight in vinegar, so that it eats away ever so slightly and gives a key for your paint. I'm not sure if he says that sort of tongue in cheek now, or whether he still thinks that that's a kind of something that we do now, which I don't think most people do with the advances in paint and primer and everything else. But he talks about all that, which is really interesting stuff. But then he talks, about the modern companies and the rise and fall of GW as the only kind of large wargaming company in the world at one point, I think, or the preeminent one at least.
Yeah.
But it's really a great book. It's worth a look, and often you'll find it in your library. So check that out if you're a library person, if you've got a library nearby. But the main reason for mentioning it is, well, one, just to kind of let you know that that's coming up. But the other reason is that there's a new book that's going to be released soon, which according to Amazon is March 4th, 2020, next year, I guess. So that's still a little way away, but it's called Wargaming Campaigns. So apparently it's around the same sort of 700 or 800 pages, and I'm really looking forward to that, Wargaming Campaigns, because that's something that both you and I have been working on a little bit lately. So that should be a good book to hold out for between now and then.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm always interested in seeing people's campaign stuff, and it's one of those things that I sort of look at, tuck away somewhere, sometimes rip a page out, sometimes take a photo and just store away somewhere of the few pages that it's covered. But it's always interesting, and someone who's done so many and hidden them away and written about them, it should be really great.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. Still a way away, but looking forward to getting that, which I guess dovetails into another thing that I've been doing over the last time since we've chatted, and that is I've been looking a bit more into the solo war games topic.
Good.
So we've been talking about maybe a system for solo wargaming for bolt action. Maybe could be adapted to other games, certainly Chain of Command and a few others that use a similar sort of, perhaps a similar theatre of war. It's not going to necessarily go over to Romans or an ancient war or a futuristic war, but I think there's an opportunity there for a rule system that overlays an existing rule system, so you can still play your bolt action or your chain of command or whatever it is that you want to play, with the solo card or dice something driven overlay that allows you, particularly me, because I don't know, I don't seem to be able to get a chance to play a game in normal people's time. It's always 11 o'clock at night, as I mentioned before. And have a good game that actually replicates to some degree a real opponent. Do you think it's feasible, Dan, or do you think it's pie in the sky?
No, I think it's reasonable. I think there's a lot of things that, if you're trying to create friction, there is... Bolt Action's got like a certain amount of friction built into it. The biggest amount of friction, which is who goes next. Which I think is actually the biggest amount of friction that you probably need. But after that, if you can replicate some sort of a layover for, what the opposing force does, what the red force does against your blue force, is, it's exciting. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I've been doing a bit of research. I got onto Solo Wargamers Facebook page, which, that's a niche within a niche within a niche. And I just put out a query for anybody who had any rule systems that they knew of that talked about the mechanics of, I guess, synthesizing orders from the other side. But they have to make sense. There's no point charging these guys or shooting these guys or running away in this situation. It has to take into account some sort of situational awareness. And, is that possible, or is that just a joke? That's, if you want that, play, Call of Duty on the PC kind of thing.
Yeah.
And interestingly, guys came back with a couple of interesting suggestions. And one in particular, which I ended up buying pretty quick, was Platoon Forward. Now, I don't have it to hand to know who the author is, but it's distributed, I guess, published and distributed by Two Fat Lardies. So if you go to the Two Fat Lardies website and have a look there at Platoon Forward, very interesting book. Very interesting book. So not only does it deal with within the heat of the battle, what does the other guy do, but it also has a lot of other campaign aspects, which I'm not so much interested in. But is my leader courageous? Is he foolhardy? Is he timid? That sort of thing, and how does that affect the outcome of the game or the outcome of the campaign after this game's been completed? But very interesting. So if that's something that you're interested in, go and have a look at that. Platoon Forward, Two Fat Lardies.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out. I might go and make a purchase based on that, and have a look. Post this course that I'm on now, I should have a little bit of a quieter sort of time that I might be able to get my head into it. I have to say, it will have to wait till after the D-Day anniversary, because I'm going to be head down and bottom up painting until then. But you've got me excited there, Rex.
Yeah, so that's a bunch of stuff that I've been doing anyway. I've got a couple more things that I've been doing, but maybe it's time for me to stop talking and you to tell me all about your hopes and dreams and aspirations and plans for the future, Dan.
Well, as I say, like my sort of future stuff at the moment is just head down, bottom up, paintbrush out, getting these paras done. I've got these miniatures done as part of my reasonable hobby challenge that you set me, or we actually agreed on ourselves. You were very kind to let me do so. As well as that, I've got to paint another couple of jeeps. One of which I'm going to get one of the airborne recce jeeps from Warlord. I will make the MMG gunner removable, probably magnetized for this one. So basically I can just play a jeep as a tow for a gun, and then place it in and make it into a recce jeep. As well as that, obviously I'm missing the limber, but just a jeep sitting nearby will be good enough for this scenario. As well as that, I plan on getting one of the airborne sort of signals jeep as well, just because that's something that I've spoken about before. I wanted to have one in repertoire, so that can just be another jeep, so to speak of, and so that'll be complete. So I sort of got those 23 guys to paint, plus the crews inside the jeeps and the 2 jeeps, and then I'm done. Oh, and in a tank. I think it was a Churchill or something I need to paint too. So that'll keep me busy. I might actually see if someone can lend me that one, because I don't really foresee in my immediate future a need to have one of those sort of larger British tanks. So who knows? But I might have to end up buying one and painting one. So that's going to keep me busy, isn't it?
That is going to keep you busy, but I like the sly way that your reasonable hobby challenge sort of has ended up being. Is it true to say? Is it fair to say, Dan? Would a reasonable jury convict you on saying that you've basically made your reasonable hobby challenge whatever you get done, or have you actually got a goal?
No,
because you haven't furnished me.
That's the goal.
You haven't furnished me with the goal yet, so I can track you and hold you accountable.
That's the goal. I've got
Right,
23 dudes I have to paint with rifles and 3 guys with LMGs. 3 of those guys actually have got SMGs, so they don't need technically painting, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's the kind of guy I am. So 23 guys, 2 jeeps plus the occupants, and potentially a tank. Don't hold me to the tanks. If I can borrow one, I am going to borrow one. But that's my challenge that you have agreed on. So there. Write it in black and white. Sign it now.
Okay. All right. Okay. I want one of those tanks. Maybe I should buy one and send it to you. You can paint it, and then I'll own it.
All right. Okay. I've been reliably informed that the week of of D-Day is the week that the British vehicles changed their colour as well, from bronze green to something else, as Tony Ormandy quite politely told me when I met him randomly in the model shop one day. So that's good. That's interesting.
Right, okay. Well, you can't have your tank the wrong colour. That would just be the unforgivable sin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk more about that off camera, as
Cool.
it were. So, speaking of reasonable hobby challenge, I sort of haven't really gone very well with mine. I've still got some time to go. So it's only the 13th now. When was my date? What was my end date?
I have this feeling it was like, was it the end of this month or was it the middle of this month, this one? We're going to have a re-listen. We're going to have a judge's photo finish. We'll have to go back and study the evidence.
Are you going to go back and study the evidence, are you?
No, I'm not. So...
okay, so do you think I could pull the wool over your eyes and say that
the end of this month?
Well, it was actually in 2 days' time, but...
Oh,
yeah, but I've got a few. I've been playing a few card games recently. I've been playing them at work, and I've been playing them here. And sort of the names on some of my cards are the "I've been sick" card.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've also been playing the "I've got a sick family member" card.
Yeah.
I've also got the "I'm really busy at work" card. So I don't know. Is there an opportunity to play any of those cards, maybe, and get maybe a week's grace? Maybe.
I'm going to, based on the evidence presented before me, let's say the end of May, eh? Let's move it to the end of May.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that should be easily done then. I think that's pretty generous, but I'll go with that. I'm also painting something else as well. I've got a surprise paint that I'm working on at the same time, so that'll be my extra bonus. Yeah.
Okay, the end of May then. So you've paid your penalty then because you've had to paint something else. So let's call it the end of May.
Yeah. So I'm painting up the Winter War German codex. I was going to say the German Army book. Bolt Action version 2 comes with the that miniature that has the 2 German guys in winter uniform, one guy pulling the other injured guy to safety. So I've been painting that as well. So that's my first winter war painting. So in the great coats with the white parka jacket thing, whatever you call it, and that as well. And I'm really excited about that. So yeah, I'll put some photos up on the blog about that.
Since I'm the challenger, and I've challenged you to do that, then I will graciously give you to the end of the month because I want to see you put your full effort into it, be so happy with all those miniatures. So go for it.
Yeah, so I've got big plans for the Fallschirmjäger. These are the offensive miniatures, Fallschirmjäger dragging the drop boxes, the drop canisters rather.
Yep.
Just for those who haven't listened to the previous podcast, shame on you if you haven't. So but I've got big plans of barbed wire and fences and all kinds of stuff. So they're real miniature dioramas because they're on 60mm basis, so they really are miniature dioramas. So I'm really looking forward to getting them done. I've been working away on my my new hobby table, and that's been working pretty well. But I'm a little bit behind, so sorry about that, internet and the world.
No, go for it. Go for it. So that sort of probably brings us into when you have finished those, following our last episode sort of main content, probably following your painting workflow. Will you be following a workflow for those miniatures?
I am.
Good.
I am, but I've already got a recipe for them, so that's easy to work through. So yeah, I've got it all there. Got the recipe with the checklist printed out, and so I'm just working through that. So it's pretty easy because I've done them before. But then after I've done those, it's just a case of starting to get ready for D-Day if I'm going to do anything for that, but also for this campaign Budapest thing that's coming up in July. So I'll be a full army for that to get done by 6th of July. So that's 6 weeks. So 6 weeks for a new army that I haven't done before. I haven't worked with that colour scheme before. So yeah, I mean, 6 weeks is a long time, but the amount of time that your average person gets in between kids and work and whatever, it'll be a bit of a push. But I'll be looking forward to it. So that'll be my next hobby challenge, already to go, if that's okay, Dan.
Yeah, definitely. All right then. Well, why don't we go on to the main content of the of today's podcast then? If that wasn't main enough, because man,
if that wasn't main enough,
loads going on.
But there's loads going on, and there's plenty going on with us as well. But it's an exciting time to be in wargaming for sure. And let's take a break now, get a drink, come back, and then we'll start on the main content. And I'll be looking forward to it.
Definitely go get a drink, everyone. You've deserved it listening to us. See you soon.
See you soon.
Are you positive that ankle's broken?
Compound fracture, sir.
Well, put the boot back on and lace it up. Tight.
Don't get mad at me, Colonel. I didn't break it.
No, and you're not going to have to walk on it either.
Colonel, you don't mean to tell me you're going to try and...
Knock it off, Doc, and do as you're told. Yes?
A, B, and C companies scattered all over like we are.
Go on.
Major Conklin landed on the stone wall and broke his shoulder. I left him with a medic.
Any contact with F Company?
No, sir, but they must be somewhere up ahead of us in the direction of St. Mary Glees.
Ow! Well, go ahead. Tie it off. Tie it off. Well, here's where we are. The northern edge of this swamp area. 5 miles from our drop zone. 5 miles. F Company?
No, sir. And we got scouts out all over the place. We even picked up a group from the 101.
F Company, first to the lead plains. Well, we'll head out this way. We ought to reach high ground and open country by daybreak. I'd have the men spread out, pick up any stragglers they can find. Pass the word.
Right, sir. All right, then, spread out. Pick up any stragglers you see along the way. Pass the word down.
All right. Let's go.
So, Rex, the reason for me discussing about what you're going to do when you finish those miniatures that we just talked about, that you're currently doing, is because I wanted to move on to basically discuss varnish for your miniatures. How's that for a contentious discussion topic?
Yeah, that's right. So, I guess a lot of people don't do it at all.
Yep.
I would never put miniatures on the table without it because of the sticky finger syndrome. I'm partial to a few chippies and nuts and whatever else is going in terms of snack food, and I like to snack while I game. And the idea of spending all that time on painting and then ending up with miniatures where the top half of the mini's all discoloured from hand grease. Just just conjures up something that I don't want to go there. But so I think it's worth discussing. So you varnish or clear coat, whatever you want to call it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so basically, first of all, I wanted to go into some pros and cons of it. But first of all, talking about what you're speaking about, yeah, absolutely. Look, there are some people out there that might not realise that some of the major companies actually don't use varnish quite often. Games Workshop, for one, their studio miniatures, they've said on many an occasion they don't use varnish of any kind on their studio miniatures. I guess the reason for that is they're in control of them, so therefore they know how precious they are, the amount of time they've invested in them, the care they must take in them. But the main reason which would reflect on this pros and cons is they believe that it knocks back the colours and takes the vibrancy out of the colours of the miniatures. So that is one of the essential things that I like to seek out in a varnish, that to ensure that it really doesn't happen as much as humanly possible, whilst acknowledging that it actually does take some of that vibrancy out, just trying to absolutely minimise it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. My last army that I painted, my Fallschirmjäger, I thought it had reasonably high contrast in the camo, between the camo and the base colour. Once I gave them a good hit with varnish, which I think I may be prone to overdoing it a little bit, but it definitely knocked some of the contrast back. And when I looked at them again, I thought to myself, you know what, this varnishing process actually starts way earlier on. This varnishing process actually starts with your part of your colour choices, knowing that it's going to knock it back a little bit. Maybe you need to start with something that's a little bit more contrasty than what you would have otherwise done.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's something that we can work into our painting workflow that we spoke about last time. So that's a really good point, Rex. After that, the first consideration I like to think of when I'm thinking about what varnish to use is probably, am I going to apply a spray can or from a bottled or a pot product? I guess what I'll call pottles from now on.
Okay, you coined a new term.
Yeah, pottles. Is that not a thing? Is that not a thing?
I don't know. I've never heard it before, but I'm willing to roll with it.
Okay, if it's not, then it's trademarked now. So all your people out there that want to use pottles, sorry, you now owe me a...
We work for plastic.
Yeah. So firstly, spray cans. So I'm going to do some pros and cons for each of these. So spray cans, the pros as I see them. And jump in if you maybe at the end or halfway through if you feel, as I do each one, if you feel particularly passionate about it, Rex. Here's a bit of a list. I think it's fairly in-depth, but I'm interested in anybody else's feedback on this as well, so please use your user channels to get back to us. So, first of all, pros, the spray cans. So good coverage with the ability to avoid over-application. So, in other words, we can keep the spray varnish moving rapidly, get pretty good coverage. Likewise, you can generally see, because it's sort of a wetness, that you can see where you've been as well, so you can rotate the miniatures, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I'd agree with that, but only based on your ability with the spray can. So I find that I don't use a lot of spray cans. I don't use a primer spray can, that's another whole episode that we're going to do hopefully shortly about primer. So much. The reason that I'm lucky enough to have an airbrush and a compressor and all that, the reason that I use that is because it does give me a little bit more control. So in fact, my spray can technique is not that great, and I do really, really have to watch it to make sure that I don't overdo it. What are your three? You're pretty good with the spray can, Dan. What are your 3 tips on spray can? Pretty obvious. Most people will know them already, but just for the sake of completion.
Keep your spray can level. So if you need to elevate your miniatures to the level that you're going to be spraying on, so that you can visually see what's going on. Rotate your miniatures. so that you can get coverage. Probably spray from 4 different directions, and yeah, you rotate your miniatures probably on like a Lazy Susan type affair, which is a rotating base for those of you who don't know, or the ability to sort of shuffle around the block slash box slash whatever that you're spraying them on. I reckon that's my top tips.
And the other one is distance as well, I suppose.
Sorry, distance. Yeah, probably about 1 foot away. No need to get any closer. It depends on which can or what brand you're using, and we'll due to the propellant and stuff like that, which is something I'm going to definitely touch on later.
All right, good.
Good. So another pro, time saver in application, and thin layers dry fast also. So time saver as opposed to brushing stuff on. Remember, a lot of these pros and cons are comparing spray cans to the bottles and vice versa. So time saver in application and thin layers, if you spray it on, as we spoke about, using those tips and techniques, should dry fairly fast.
Yeah, I think it's a time saver in terms of in comparison to what I do as well. So for me to airbrush a bit of clear coat over the top of my minis, which I don't do, by the way, I also use a spray can. But if I was to do that, that involves me getting 2 cars out of the garage, starting up the compressor, rolling out the hose, plugging everything in, spraying it, wiping it down, cleaning it out, packing everything away, putting the cars away again. So that's, if you've got a lot of miniatures, I mean, sure, you're going to save some money, you're going to, maybe have a bit more control, but it's just so much easier to grab a spray can off the shelf, wander outside, spray it, and you're done.
Yep. I totally agree, and to be honest, as a bit of a diversionary comment here, I actually feel the same about that for priming too. It pains me to use an airbrush primer when I could use a primer like that. But we'll talk about that again on the primer episode at another time, won't we?
On the primer?
The primer. I almost said that then. You get out of my mind.
Well, that was my joke from last time, and because I don't have very many good jokes, I try to reuse them. So
and you are a dad.
That. Well, that is true.
All right, the next pro, you can do basing materials. In other words, you can varnish basing materials without fear of dislodging / scraping it off the base, which you do with a brush. So obviously. Well, not obviously. Most of us, especially if we talked about our paint flow and stuff earlier, you tend to paint your basing material, your gravel or your sand or whatever it is. You might paint that, and you can then spray paint over the top of it, seal that in without fear of dislodging it again with a brush.
Sounds good.
Next one. Likewise, you can also seal terrain materials with irregular surfaces, so those with vegetation, rocks, trees, etc. Again, without dislodging that stuff, which is pretty darn important. So you're picking one product then that can actually do your terrain and your miniatures. Agreed?
Yeah, that is good. Nothing like having 10 different products for 10 different purposes and able to keep 10 in stock and 5 of them are going off.
Yep.
And need to be used, and the other 5 you're out of. But you can't use product B for job A. So yeah, if you can find something that does a good job for everything or multiple things, then you're on a win.
Yeah, definitely. Another pro: less handling of minis during the process. Because you're not literally touching it, and you can be rotating around, and more on that in a minute. You're not really touching the base as much as you would have to with a painted one. Generally, painted one, of course, you could still say, well, you don't have to physically touch the miniature with your hand. You could have it on mount, like what you've got, Rex, which is awesome. But you are touching the miniature with the brush to apply it. So yeah, you're physically touching the mini less with any sort of product if you're just spray painting it, or spray varnishing it, I should say.
Yep, I agree with that.
Next one. Spray paint can be very economical if you batch spray and you do it cleverly to maximize. So maximize and you balance out your spray cone, your coverage, your angles of spray, using that lazy Susan method to rotate your base, and also think about staggering your miniatures. So, for instance, if you have them in a staggered file sort of situation, so that you can get all the fronts of the miniatures across, and then turn them side on, and then you've sort of got them staggered again, so you can get all the sides of them generally. So if you do that rather than having them in lines where you can't get an angle, then you save a lot of of spray varnish, and you also avoid getting build-up of varnish on your models.
Yeah, I actually, when I'm doing a lot of spraying, I use my spray mace.
Yep.
And by that I don't mean I'm going to spray you in the face and make your eyes bleed. I actually have a stick with some either magnetic material on either side, or steel material on either side if my miniatures are magnetized. And what I actually do is I stick my miniatures all to my spraying mace, as in like a medieval bashing instrument, and that gives me the total maneuverability to be able to move it around and spray it. And then I've even got a little hook at the end where I can hook it up and hang and let it dry. So by doing that, I managed to get a pretty good efficiency for the spray, whatever spray method you use, because it allows you to, while you're spraying the side of this guy, you're actually spraying the front of that guy, kind of thing, if you can imagine it.
Yeah, good. I like it. Definitely recommend maces over morning stars because they don't stick to the chain as well.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. I'll put a photo up on the valhallagames.net.
Sounds good.
And you can check it out.
Good. And the last one is something you mentioned earlier as well. So there's no cleanup compared to decanting bottles into your airbrush, etc., which we'll come on to more later.
Yep, that's a good one. That's airbrushing's fine, but man, it can be a real pain.
Yep. So cons then. So the arguments against spray cans. They can be expensive to buy per unit. So you've got to be used cleverly, as we've discussed already, to recoup your cost, which is especially true of specific miniature hobby brands of varnish.
Yep, that's very true. And if you're not using it efficiently, which we've already talked about, and the majority of your sprays go, if you're painting one miniature, one miniature is probably actually not too bad. But if you're trying to paint 3 miniatures, it can get pretty inefficient because the most of your spray is disappearing off into the atmosphere, and you're paying for that.
Yep, definitely. Now the con, there's many brands available, which can cause big trust issues, and justifiably so. So, in my opinion, beware of unknown brands and take the proven route. In my opinion, it is still absolutely worth it to spend extra for proven brands.
Yeah, so I've heard, on various Facebooks and forums and whatever, people saying, well, I get this from my local hardware store and it's really great, and I get that from here and it's really great, or I get this, this product from my junk store and, I've been using it for years and it's really good. But, it's probably fine. If it works for you and it's tested, then that's okay. But I'm not going to play that game just for one simple reason, and that is I purchased the miniature, which is a cost, but my biggest cost is my time. I really don't have a lot of time. And if I've spent 3 months painting an army, just trying to eke out every last little bit of time that's available to paint it, and I'm really happy with it and it's really beautiful, the last thing I'm going to use is an untested clear coat. And you're going to come on to risks later, I'm sure, but an untested clear coat, it's just, when you look at the time and you factor that into the money, if you work at an hourly rate, $12 or $15 for a brand name spray can, to me it's just so much better value than $8 or $4 for something that may or may not work.
Yep. And let me tell you, if I have a spray can that doesn't work and it screws up a paint job I've done, I'm going to take that spray can back and cut out somebody's heart with it.
Okay, we would just say that Valhalla Games does not encourage violence against your hobby shop owner, but that's so Dan's personal views may be held by himself, but may not be the views of Valhalla Games.
Yep, definitely. The interviewees' personal opinions are not necessarily the views of this podcast, except for that one.
Beating him up. Yeah, beating him up maybe is fine, but cutting at his heart might be going a bit too far.
All right. I may have Tourette's. I'm getting investigated. All right then. Weather sensitivity. So in other words, both temperature and humidity can have big effects, and it can rule out application on a critical path or time frame. So if you're counting down that critical path to an event, and suddenly the day before you've got high humidity and freezing cold temperatures or whatever, you know that is a con. You could be in trouble there.
Do you think so? You're comparing that to because that con is also a con of airbrush, I guess, or anything that atomizes the paint. But are you suggesting, because I've never done it before, that painting with a brush from the pottle is less susceptible to problems based on humidity? Is that a thing, or?
I firmly believe it's a thing because the propellant's not affected as much, or because there's no propellant involved. So yeah, in my opinion, it really is a thing. So yeah, I have painted 1 or 2 miniatures. That's an understatement. I'm using a brush before, and I definitely think that the frosting thing is with the propellant, everything's affected, and the time it passes through that air containing the humidity and through the air containing the icy cold wind or whatever before it gets to your model. I believe, in my opinion, that's where the problems happen.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. So it actually picks it up.
Yep.
Picks up the humidity from the air as it's traveling through the air, whereas you don't have that problem in brush form.
Yep.
So much, maybe. Let's just leave it open.
Yeah.
In case someone's army gets destroyed. But yeah, okay. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So obviously, if we ignore that, the results can range from mildly to severely negatively affected, as we've already discussed. So next one, it can be hard to source good trusted brands, and it can be harder to acquire said brands due to dangerous goods, packages, etc., due to the propellant. So in other words, if you live in a place that's far away from like an accessible hobby store or a very good hobby store or something like that, and you want a trusted brand because you've listened to the guys at Valhalla Games, please do, thank goodness, then it could be hard for you to get it due to the dangerous goods cargo for couriers and stuff like that.
Yeah, so just to expand on that for anybody who doesn't know, carrying, from my limited understanding, carrying aerosol cans in planes is a no-no. So what you have to do, from my understanding, is if you want, spray can X sent from Melbourne to Sydney or to Auckland or Christchurch or whatever, it has to go via surface mail. So, and not only does it have to go via surface mail, but it has to go specifically tagged as surface mail so that if there's extra space on an airplane, it doesn't accidentally get thrown in the airplane. Is that your understanding of it too, Dan?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, so you actually pay extra to, and I'm not sure if all hobby shops would necessarily ship it as they probably should. It's like, disposing of your batteries in the bins. There's certain ways you're supposed to dispose of batteries and certain ways you aren't.
So I believe, just from my limited knowledge, which could be completely full of it here, but I believe that some cargo planes take said dangerous cargo because they are pressurized, and so therefore they provide some stability for it, which is why some get there. But like, for instance, Games Workshop and that they're not going to send out just your individual orders that way. That's sort of bulk orders for like their shops or whatever the case might be. So, yeah. Right,
gotcha. Okay. So following on from that, I've got, just in your recent, the Big Tiger 2 build,
Big Tiger
build that you've done, you recommended Tamiya, was it TS3, TF3.
TS, yep. Tamiya spray, I
and-
think it stands for, yep.
Yep, so that's not a clear coat, but it's still a spray can. It's still an aerosol can. And I can't get that anywhere locally, so I had to wait for 3 weeks till I was driving to a spot where I could get the spray can so I could continue with my Tiger 2. So, yeah, it can be a pain depending on where you live.
But I want to know, did you wait 3 weeks and did you get it?
I did. I've purchased it, but so far I haven't done anything with it. So I'm waiting for
Good
the
man.
humidity
You're a believer.
to be perfect.
You're a believer,
I am.
Rex. That's why I love you.
We'll see. We'll see what the end result turns
All
out
right.
like.
So next one is sort of a two-parter. So generally the large size unit size of that spray can, and because they're fairly big, and the fact that you can't transport it on planes, etc., means it's difficult to do your hobby away from your home base. So if you're sort of a guy who enjoys a bit of guerrilla painting somewhere, painting on holidays, painting while you're visiting family or something like that, then you can sort of be stuck because you can't finish it to this. Once you've painted, you can't spray that on while you're away before you transport it back. So it's just a con to be aware of.
Sure.
All right. So let's go on to pottles then, which is bottles/pots. Pottles, TM, it's a thing. Tell your friends.
It's a thing.
Yep.
Sounds good. Now, I haven't had any experience with this. I haven't painted any clear coat with varnish since 1976 or something. So, Dan, I'll let you take the floor.
I believe it may have been 1982 with your Relpatha and Grenadier Orc with Flail miniature. That you ordered from a black and white catalogue with no pictures. You're just ordering by the description of the miniature.
Was that part code RAL27? Is that the one you're referring to?
I believe it was RAL00027 Orc with Flail, right hand.
Yes. Outstanding. I remember that as well. Yeah. No, it was actually the Catalina flying plane that I was painting that I last thought, but you could be right, yes. I'll stand corrected.
All right, pottles. So pros. Individual application by hand can ensure there's no missed spots on your minis, so for maximum protection. Next one, they also have the ability to decant them into an airbrush to spray, which can give you a best of both worlds approach. So do you brush paint it on, or do you decant it and then spray it on if you've got an airbrush?
Yep, I played that game just recently. Actually, I wanted a satin spray before doing some weathering, was what was recommended, and I didn't want to keep in stock a matte, a gloss, a satin, So I just went and bought a $4 bottle of Vallejo and sprayed that, and it worked perfectly.
Yep, good stuff. Next one, easier to transport for the guerrilla painter away from their base.
Yes, Dan, that is you.
That is me. You'll spot me in camping grounds and picnic tables painting somewhere. Next one, easier to get sent in packages, etc., as there's no spray can propellant dangerous goods situation. So it speaks for itself, that one, so more or less just the opposite of the other one.
Sounds good.
Cons. There is a higher degree of attention to detail required in shaking and agitating the bottle to ensure that the product is mixed correctly. Otherwise, your results will vary enormously.
Oh, that's interesting. I've not played that game since 1976.
Yes.
So tell more.
So basically, for instance, if you're looking for a matte, don't quote me on this, but I believe matte. I believe most of the matting product sinks to the bottom of the tin /pottle/bottle, and most of the sort of medium is on the top. So if you just take the top, you have a shiny finish, even if it's supposed to be matte. So you must agitate it to get it correctly mixed to get the correct gloss/matte finish that you're supposed to have according to the what it says on the tin.
Oh, that's interesting. I've seen that too, and that makes sense. I've seen that in paints.
Yep.
You get an old or slightly dodgy paint that's not that you don't mix properly. Maybe it's been sitting for a really long time, and you don't mix it properly.
Yep.
It can come out really, really super glossy, and you go, "Oh, gee, that's interesting." But yeah, it's a mixing issue, not an actual paint issue. So,
Yep.
yeah, it makes sense.
Yep, definitely. So the detail required, well, there is detail required in your thinner, etc., to thin it for airbrushing for consistent results. So, as we've spoken about already, if you're going to add a medium, etc., you must get the detail right. Also, you've got to use the exact same brand as the varnish itself in most cases. Otherwise, you can run into real chemical difficulties where the two are not compatible.
Right, that is interesting. Okay, so for my recent situation, I used Vallejo satin paint, and I also used the Vallejo thinner. But I have heard people using water for their thinning. I tried it and I didn't really like it. I've also heard of people using is it meths? No, not meths. Something else anyway. Perhaps meths to thin their paint. But again, the amount of time you put into it, man, I wouldn't be taking that risk by putting, a 200ml bottle of Vallejo thinner. I'm just speaking to that because that's the brand that I use. Is I think about $12 or $14.
Yeah.
And 200 mils goes forever. When you're airbrushing. So yeah, I just wouldn't be taking that risk.
Yeah, likewise, I've seen, including some very reputable publications, use of what they call Windex, which I believe is a version of Window Lean or like a window cleaner to thin stuff down or whatever it is, or clean. And because there's little washers and stuff like that, and little rubber bits and all that sort of stuff in various parts of your paint of your airbrush, I wouldn't be queuing up to do that either. But yeah, so the next con for the Pottles, basically, it's a pretty simple one. This one, it does take much longer to apply if you're applying your varnish by brush, or if you're decanting it into an airbrush. That then creates the preparation and then the cleanup of the airbrush itself, which takes considerable more time than just spraying it on with a rattle can. What do you think about that, Rex?
Yep, I'd agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yep. Next one, if you're brush painting it on, you can't apply it to foliage on bases / tufts on the bases, or basing sand without dangers of losing the product dislodged by your brush. We spoke about that as a pro for the aerosol. It's an inferior coverage normally too. Vastly inferior. And if you scale that up, if we start talking about, when we want to use it on terrain pieces and stuff like that as well, potentially, or a scenic base of some sort, we really then start talking about it's pretty much impossible to spray to brush paint on lichen foliage or brush foliage or something like that, or even clump foliage with a brush, as compared to the ease of doing it with an aerosol, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And you could say, well, hey, why do you need to spray your foliage anyway? Isn't it dull to start with? Like, isn't it the right consistency to start with? But the thing with gluing foliage on, especially if you're using super glue, is that the glue itself underneath the actual foliage is going to be shiny. So on your base, you're going to get these big shiny patches. It's fine if you want them, if you want puddles, but if you don't, you got big shiny patches where it's glued on, and just that little hit of spray knocks the shine off, and also just seals it a bit as well, without having to drown the whole thing in diluted PVA glue, which then runs the risk of actually slightly changing the color of the foliage, especially when it's like that fine foam stuff from Woodland Scenics and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree, Rex. And as you say, foliage, but what you're saying is completely true for tufts as well, isn't it?
Yep.
Cool. All right. And last con. So generally, due to its method of application, so with a brush normally, it's going to take a longer drying time than over that of the spray. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's right. Especially, I'm sure you're going to come on to talk about helping spray not to get what do you call it? The white frosting. That's it. Helping your spray not to get frosting on. Once you add that into the equation, then yeah, that's a significant improvement as well.
Yeah, you're right. So let's talk about that now. A little bit of prep, probably to if you're using spray. So let's be honest. Or I'm going to lay my cards out on the table, and I'm going to say I prefer to spray. Yep, very much so. For all the reasons I believe, the pros and the cons of what I want to use it for, generally I believe that the spray and methods that I've encountered is normally better and more effective than brush painting it on or decanting it for me. So, going into the spray then, what we want to do. So I suppose the first thing is, a lot of the time people will sometimes spray a gloss spray first, a gloss varnish, or perhaps even dip a gloss varnish, or a something like a quick shade dip. And you can research that online if you're not sure what I'm talking about there, either brushing it on or dipping stuff into it. And that produces a shiny, hard gloss coat. It's generally accepted that the gloss, just by the way its chemical structure, is generally much more protective than the matte. The matte seems more of a fragile sort of a coat, and less resistant to actually resisting the chipping that comes from impact. So we're not talking about dirty hands now and stuff like that. We're talking about sort of impact chips and stuff like that. So a lot of time people use the gloss coat first, and then they'll put a spray on underneath, over top of that, of the matte, or a satin, maybe, dependent on their choice, to knock that back. How do you feel about that, Rex?
I've not heard of anybody doing that before. That's a new one to me. That's interesting. The time that I have heard about the gloss coat first is, I have heard people talk about, I've done it as well, putting a gloss coat on before you weather, to help your pin wash sort of spread out when you're doing a pin wash on a vehicle, that type of thing. I tried it once. I didn't really have a great success with it. I can see how that would work, and I can see plenty of people on YouTube with it, and it seems to work magically for them. So I can't really comment on that. But yeah, the spray and gloss coat first thing is interesting. Yeah, I'd not heard that.
Yeah. So what you're referencing there is actually it's a thing for those people who haven't heard of it. So basically, you're putting on a gloss coat before you're putting your pin washers on, or whether you're using like a brush on wash, literally from the bottle, a product wash, maybe a Vallejo or Citadel, or secret weapon washes, or army painter. So basically what you're doing is you're reducing the surface tension so that the product will actually disperse more evenly and quicker across the surface. Or in the case of doing a pin wash, it will actually help to run around the mold line, the nook and cranny, the little say gap in the armor plate that you're trying to black line in or dark line in, or whatever you're trying to do. So it actually spread with a capillary action or with less surface friction across the surface of your model. So that's what you're trying to achieve.
You've got all the nice words, Dan. Capillary action and surface tension. Anybody think you'd done research into this topic?
Yeah, I think I first heard of capillary action when I was making a doghouse with our father, actually, because he's a carpenter, and he was telling me about capillary action of water getting underneath the roof of the doghouse. So I think that stuck with me.
Wow. Okay. There you go. So one thing I'll mention on that too, when we're talking about, it's like digression, talking about
doghouses.
Well, no, capillary action, and also possibly clear coating before you start doing those pin washes or just general washes for that matter. One thing I've noticed, it took me a while to pick up on this. I was watching guys do washes on miniatures, just any sort of miniatures, either vehicles or individual soldiers, and their washes seem to really flow really well and go down to the grooves. And I couldn't work out why my washes kind of stuck to the miniature like a big sticky thing, and it wouldn't flow really. It would actually noticeably discolor. I mean, we all know that washes slightly discolor, but these would really stick to it and discolor. And what I actually noticed, which hadn't really occurred to me before, is when you base coat with a brush, you essentially end up with a how to describe it? A smooth surface, even though it's got brush marks on. It's still a smooth surface. You have, whatever you're going to put on there will flow across that surface. When you base coat with an airbrush, though, if you look at it microscopically, what you're actually seeing is a whole bunch of dots. If you imagine like a gravel driveway or something like that, that's what your actual miniature looks like microscopically. So when you put on that wash. What you're actually finding is instead of it flowing, and that was my big problem with the pin wash situation, it just wouldn't flow. It just stuck to the flat panels, and that was the end of it. But microscopically, it was gripping on those individual little luminous spheres that were created by the airbrush. So it doesn't really bother me, and I've got around it, and it just doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. But it did answer a lingering question that I had some time as to why my wash application was different to other people's wash application. And tying it back to what we're talking about, I guess if you're giving a miniature a clear coat or a satin coat, which is what I did last time, before you do your weathering, you're to some degree knocking out some of that airbrush. Microscopic spheres,
luminous spheres. Sorry, I did have to laugh when you said that. Then Rex, I didn't want to snigger over your. I could just luminous spheres. I could just see some woman like with a little makeup thing saying, "These luminous spheres will make you look like you've got that summer glow all year round. Only $14.99. And wait, that's not all. You'll get a free airbrush."
That's exactly where I got it from, Dan. I was trying to equal or see or better your capillary action.
Nice. All right, so there's all those uses for your gloss varnish, as well as that, of course. Well, it's the same thing, but for a different reason. That we tell people to put gloss or satin varnish over a panel. When they're putting on a decal or a transfer, depending on what part of the world you're from. So your water slide decals. So basically you are creating a nice flat surface. I like to put the whole over a whole panel. So if for some reason you can pick up a little bit of the gloss or shiny or satin varnish underneath the mat for some reason, then it doesn't look odd because you've done the whole panel and not just where the transfer is going to go or the decal's going to go. But that's just my preference. But yeah, that's another use and another reason why you'd be putting gloss down first or satin down first and then matte over the top.
And that's commonly called silvering. Just in case you're wondering what that topic's all about and you haven't experienced that before. So that's the silver sort of that you get underneath the decal where it's slightly sitting up from the decal itself. In fact, we touched on decal application in our last podcast, episode 6, painting workflow. So we actually go into that in a little bit of detail, and we talk about decal fix and a couple of other products that are recommended for that. So go and have a listen to the last podcast on that if you want the full story on decals. Sure.
Anybody would think we did these two in order for a specific reason. Gosh. Next thing we'll be planning. Waldorf and Statler will be impressed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Although your primer probably should have been before it all, but that's fine.
We'll just change the numbers of the episodes. No one will notice.
Yep, I agree.
All right. So that's a bit of the whys and wherefores, maybe, of where you move on to from there. So next I wanted to talk about some some spray varnishes, and I wanted to go into my trusted brands and some pros and cons of those and discuss them in a little bit more depth. And I'm going to concentrate on brands I'm currently using. I've currently tested them, so you don't have to. So it's basically going to be matte varnishes and a satin varnish, which I'll come on to in a minute. So, firstly, as sprays, I want to talk about the Army Painter Anti-Shine Varnish. This is the specific product that Army Painter designed when they first really hit the market. They designed a number of coloured sprays. It was quite basic at the time. There was 3 or 4 sprays. They also had their dips. And generally, it was acknowledged that the system was organised around those dips. They've moved on quite a bit now in the fact that people are just happy to buy Army Painter paints and spray paints and the coloured primers as they are, and there are probably more people buying those than there are going down the dip path, but this is their initial entry into the market. That's how it got out there. Now it's pro, so going through the pros, it is very matte for a start. It's very matte because it was designed to go on over the top of the dip, which is either brushed on or literally dipped on top of the miniature, which was extremely hard, extremely durable, and extremely shiny product.
Yeah, that stuff's super shiny. You dip them in, which, by the way, those dips, you don't necessarily need to dip them in. That is only one way of applying it. I actually apply my dips with a brush. And that reduces the amount that flows into the cracks and gives it a bit more control over it, but that's another whole story.
Yeah, so it's really matte stuff. It's designed that way to combat that massively high shine that the dips have. Now, another pro is that it will literally matte down the finish from those dipped minis. And another pro is that the availability of it's pretty fair. Army Painter brand is spread out most places across the world. Any sort of reputable sort of online hobby website, especially if you're doing anything like historical or fantasy miniatures rather than just the scale models. They're pretty far-reaching, the Army Painter brand at this stage, aren't they, Rex?
Yeah, that's right. You might not see it at a model shop. It's more in the realm of a wargaming shop. But yeah, there's other products that you'll probably see in a hobby shop that you might not see in a wargaming shop, which we'll come on to soon.
Yep. So another one is, okay.
Before you move on from that, actually, I just wanted to say I had a bad experience with Army Painter.
Okay, well, hang on. Let's go into the cons on that first, I reckon, and then because one of them might be what you're about to say. How does that sound?
Okay, sounds good.
So let's finish off with the final pro. So I think the final pro is that I've never had a problem with compatibility with hobby ranges of paints or varnishes. So other hobby ranges, say Vallejo, Citadel, etc., I've never had a chemical reaction with them. Yeah, which is good because it can happen. And I think another pro, which I haven't got listed here, is I'm constantly impressed with, this is not specific to the spray varnish, by the way, but I'm constantly impressed at how Army Painter have that little booklet. It's probably about 12 pages you can take away that explain how to use their whole range of products from start to finish, and includes the use of their anti-shine varnish. So literally, if you're getting into the hobby, they will more or less tell you how to use their paints and their whole system all the way, and I think that's really, really good. How about you?
Yeah, that is fantastic. I've done that twice, actually. I've 2 guys that were getting into the hobby. I went and found that little booklet, grabbed a couple of those, and said, here, read this. This is a good basis for everything that you're going to be doing from now on. Sure, there's a lot more to it than what might be shown here, but if you follow everything in here, you'll end up with a pretty fair miniature in pretty quick time. So, yeah, full points to them for that. I mean, they don't need to do that. They could just sell the pottles like everybody else, but that definitely is head and shoulders above the rest in terms of customer support.
Yeah, and I just just by way of legal disclaimer there, you've used the word pothole, so I'll send you my bank account number later for a payment. You happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Actually. Yeah, we might as well start out. We might as well start out as we mean to continue.
Okay. All right. So I've got some cons now, and my plan is to go through these cons one by one, and then at the end, I'd love to hear your story, Rex, and how it relates to the cons. Because I don't know everything about the story, but I'm very interested to see if what I say stands up to in relation to your story. How does that sound?
Yes, I'm a very angry single issue voter, but I'll hold my tongue for now.
Okay. All right. All right then. Cons. It is a much more liquid and less vaporous spray. It's a very, very wet spray. There is something odd about the Army Painter propellant, and I can't put my finger on it. Okay, what I will say is this, yeah.
That must make it hard to spray.
Well, yeah. Basically, so there's two things. It makes it very, very.
If you can't put your finger on it, that is.
Boom, boom. Okay, so two things. It's very wet for a start. Secondly, there's actually, in my mind, it's actually a propellant issue because I find that there's a spray nozzle longevity issue due to the propellant. So I've actually never finished a can of Army Painter varnish. I've never done it, and I hardly ever finish a can of Army Painter spray paint due to the clogging or propellant issues. Now, it seems as if the propellant just runs out. It's very odd sort of a spray. It's much less vaporous and much more liquid when it comes out. So, yeah.
No, that is interesting. Do you do the upside down blowout thing to clear it out?
I do.
Like, obviously not over and above what you would expect to be normal.
Yeah, no. So I do that to a normal extent. So I don't expect it to impact on my on my bottle somehow. So I have done that, and yes, it still repeats. It's something about the spray. Now I've heard people who do street art talk about the different types of propellant in their cans. By street art, I guess bombing graffiti type of art, but proper street artists talking about the different types of propellant in their cans, and I've often thought I'd love to spend 5 minutes with them talking about it so they can tell me. But yeah, so look, that's a con in my mind. Very wet, you have to be very cautious. Which leads into the next one. Not, in capital letters, not recommended over tufts, etc. on the base. Reason for that is you get globs and frosting in the tufts. Okay, I have the longer tufts, so only not long, just like 4 or 5 millimeter sort of tufts. The sort of average Army Painter or whatever. Highland tufts or whatever the case is. Yep, so a little globbing of liquid stuck in it, and if it hasn't got that, then quite often frosting the tips, so it looks like it's sort of a wintry sort of effect. Yeah.
Okay.
Next one. Okay, it is that anti-shine, that to that extent that it will kill the vibrancy of any glazes. So in other words, your thin layers of colour you put over top of something. It'll kill the vibrancy of your metallics and some wash details. So the washes around your face, there's a little bit of facey miniatures. I like there to be almost a natural look to the wash, like you've just put it on. There's something vibrant about it, about how it's got like a transparency to it. It's got a natural sort of gradation off the cheek into the groove of where the nose line is or something like that. And what happens is the Army Painter spray is that matte, that's straight, not over the top of your dips or something like that. Because I don't use dips, it will kill the vibrancy of that and look very, very plain and very stark. And I don't find that particularly appealing to the eye.
Okay,
yep.
Interesting.
So it will kill the vibrancy of the colours of the super matte. If you're looking for something that's really, really matte, then this is the thing for you. Yeah, but it will kill the vibrancy of the colours. So, yep. if you're looking for fantasy sort of colours and stuff like that, real vibrancy, if you've got your layers of glazes and washes and stuff like that, I don't necessarily recommend this for all the reasons I've said before. So yeah, so that's my pros and cons. Now I'd love to hear your story, Rex, and see if that relates to any of those.
Yeah, it does, I think. So it didn't end up being a big deal for me because of what I was doing, and I spotted the issue pretty quickly. But I'd actually done a commission piece of terrain, the only terrain commission piece that I've ever done, and it was perfect. And I was right ready to ship it, and I thought, well, before I ship it, I'll just give it a bit of a dull coat, bit of a matte coat to just to knock back some of the shine that were on a couple of the items. And I got out the Army Painter stuff and gave it a bit of a spray, and weirdly, what was coming out of the end was actually, you've ever seen that stuff that you can get spray cans with for Halloween, for spraying spider webs? You can spray it around your inch to your house, and it just comes out like thin spidery web stuff. Yeah, well, it was like that. It was coming out like that, and I was able to grab a couple of the strands that had come off that were just kind of hanging on the model, and just actually pull them off. And then when it was dry, I just gave it a little bit of a rub with my finger at the points where they joined on, and it was fine. But so I thought maybe that it was possibly a humidity issue or something like that. I don't know, which we'll come on to discuss that in a while. But I just put the thing up on the shelf, and then I came back to it a month later, and there was actually a little bit of the paint leaking out of the bottom of the bottle. So that the actual spray can itself there was no visible damage, but the seal on the bottom of the spray can where the machine had linked it together was faulty, and it was leaking out. So I threw it away. But I'm not super angry about it or anything. And it could have just been a bad can, which is why I mentioned the leakage. But yeah, I definitely it could have gone horribly wrong if I was doing a final coat on an army that I'd spent months on. It could have gone really bad.
Would you have been lining up to cut someone's heart out with the can?
No, but I would have sent him a very stern email.
Grr. Okay, yeah, that's pretty crazy stuff, and I'm relating that directly to the fact it's wetness that I spoke to before, and the strange propellant, to be honest.
Yeah, but having said that, lots and lots of people swear by it and say it's the best thing they've ever used, and they'd never use anything else. You can, of course, just get a bad batch, and maybe that's my situation. So I'm not damning it to eternity based on one experience, but I probably won't use it again.
Yeah, I used it to do all my Space Wolf army for 40k, and so what I found is that it gave a really pleasing finish on all the power armor, everything like that. The faces, as I've already discussed, that I had that sort of thing with the faces where I felt I lost some of the transparency, and some of that gradiated sort of transparency that a nice wash will give you when it finishes on like a surface like a face. I felt like I lost some of that, but that was sort of acceptable. But then what really got me was the metal parts of the armor. So things like brass, the sort of bolt gun metal, the metal of like close combat weapons and stuff like that. It just was miles off what I wanted it to be, and eventually I ended up getting a satin varnish and going over all those pieces with like a satin varnish to bring it up again. And yeah, I've moved on now to another product. I'm not damning it to eternity either. I can tell you that what happened to you rings true. That's not an odd case due to all the things I've explained, but also, I've had 2 cans of their product now, paint, that have actually at the concave bottom, sort of, where it goes concave up into the can itself, has actually blown out and created like a convex. It's actually gone out the other way, and I've thrown them away as quickly as I found it because I don't really want a spray can to explode in my face or something like that. So, not saying it's going to. Not saying it's going to. That's bordering on, maybe slanderous. But I just don't like the safety around those sorts of things happening with a pressurized product.
Yeah, and I guess all of these things are, everybody's got their own personal experiences in that, but the way I look at it is you gather all the information. If you've got your trusted products, and we talked about this already before, if you've got your Bunnings, budget spray can, or your Citadel whatever, or and you use it and it's great, then stick with that. But if you're new to the hobby, then I guess this is going to be a great podcast for you, because you're going to be able to not make some of the mistakes that other people have made. But it's a matter of gathering your evidence and kind of triangulating your position based on what everybody says. If everybody says that product X is terrible, well then you got a pretty clear indication. If some of the people say that it is, and the other half say that it's great, then maybe they've got quality control issues. If everybody says it's great, well then you've got a pretty good chance of having success.
Yeah. And I think we've already highlighted our enthusiasm, and if not, let's state it again, our enthusiasm for many, many of the other products, the washes, the paints, the spray paints. The range has increased so much in the spray paints. So many of them are fantastic. They are matched quite closely by their respective colours in the little bottles as well, the dropper bottles. So yeah, very good range, excellent product they put out explaining how to use the range. Yeah, just so those, the pros and the cons, but definitely pros as well of using the Army Painter spray, super matte spray.
Sounds good.
All right, next one. I tested these products so you didn't have to. Okay, Games Workshop Aegis Varnish. So, I am presuming, and I shouldn't do, but let's go to presumption land, that this is basically the old Purity Seal varnish of Games Workshop. They stopped short of calling it a satin varnish. Oh, sorry, a matte varnish. I believe it is described in some areas as a satin varnish. Okay, so the pros are, it is a wet stone sort of look, but it was less satin than what I was expecting. Yep, so it's somewhere between matte and what I would call a genuine satin. Certainly a Vallejo satin. I've used the product, and to me it was just like the same effect as the old GW Purity Seal. Probably not the same formula or anything like that. They're constantly looking like everybody for different suppliers and stuff like that. But I was pretty impressed with it. It was less satin and more matte than what I expected, but it isn't quite matte.
And what's the price like?
I'll come on to that.
I'll let you go on to your pros and cons.
Okay, another pro, fair availability due to GW proliferance of the supply system. So there's lots of GW suppliers out there. If you can't find one local to you, there's plenty online. So it's not a product that is hard to find. What I would say is hard to find. There is that dangerous good things, but I'll come on to that again in the cons. Next one. The wet stone finish is suitable for sealing prior to inks and weathering, etc. So there's that whole breaking the surface tension, evening out the surface for transfers, for washes and stuff like that. It does that very well.
Meaning that you don't have to have two products, keep two products in stock, one for doing before your weathering, if that's the way you like to do it, and then another one for after.
Yeah, so long as you're happy with a wet stone look as opposed to a matte.
Right, gotcha.
Okay. Next one. A definite pro is the Games Workshop or Citadel, which is what their painting system products are. The Citadel Propellant. Yep. Citadel, and I'm going to fly the flag here, in my opinion, the Citadel primers, spray cans, base coats, whatever they're called these days, and this varnish product which I tried, in my opinion, has got the best spray system in the sort of, I guess, more available modeling sort of sprays. It is very, very good. The propellant system for GW sprays is that good. You can use it sideways. You can actually literally use it upside down for a certain amount of squirts or sprays, and then it will revert to, when you pull it back up again, it will continue to work normally. It is very, very good, and it's very vaporous. You get a nice cone of spray off it. It's very reliable. Stuff comes out. It's quite vaporous, but then at the far end, it's not over wet. It's not over dry. It's really good. And you can use your mace, your lazy Susan, whatever you're doing, to turn your stuff around a little bit less. Because to be honest, you can do a little bit of cheating because your can actually go on all sorts of angles.
Yeah, I can't comment on the varnish because I've not used it, but I absolutely agree with you on the primer. I've used some of their primer, and I think that's a good primer. Let's just leave it at that. For all the reasons that you've said.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you agree with that one. I've never found anyone who's actually used it that has said otherwise. I found people say, "Oh well, Vallejo's almost as good," but they've never turned around and never been able to say genuinely that the Citadel stuff's not better. It's always something else is trying to be as good as. To me, it's like the pedestal product in that regard.
With primer also, which we'll come on to in our primer, it depends on, there's a big difference between priming metal and priming plastic, I've found. So that's a big consideration. So anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Okay. So another pro is that this product is more suitable for armor. So armor platings. Say you're doing your Romans or you're doing Grey Knights 40k or something like that. Something that's got a lot of armor, sort of metallics in their colours. Yep. This is better for you than the super matte or even the matte. It's just got that satin sheen on it. It's a little bit more realistic. So that's a definite pro as well if you're looking at it from that angle.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying by that is that your choice of final clear coat is impacted somewhat depending on what you're painting. If you're painting, armies of Mordor, well, that's one thing. If you're painting, British Paras that ideally don't have any glowy, shiny things on them, so they can drop into D-Day, drop into Normandy on D-Day without getting spotted, then everything on them is matte. Whereas a fantasy army or a historical army for other periods kind of triggers the need for a different type of
product. Definitely. So now I'll move on to the cons. I have as yet not tested it over foliage/tufts. Okay, so big capital letters, I have not tested it and over foliage or tufts. So I'll be interested in people's feedback. I feel a satin finish wouldn't be suitable unless it was like broadleaf foliage, sort of a jungle finish, that sort of a thing. So, I don't know about that. Feedback on answers on the back of a postcard, ladies and gentlemen. Next one, poor availability in New Zealand generally. Okay, so I'm going to go into the GW supply system. Yep, so basically, first of all, in New Zealand here, and it'll be the same in other countries probably that have a feeder country. So say you are in, I'm just making this up, I don't know, for instance, does Scandinavia have a feeder country from England or something like that? Yeah, what happens is all the countries in England, all the suppliers, all the retailers will buy up all those stocks generally first because they can get it, they can ship it surface rather than sort of the dangerous goods sort of dependent freight. So in Australia and New Zealand, all the Australian retailers.
So So what you're saying is in New Zealand it comes from the West Island,
Yeah.
not the North Island or the
Yeah.
South Island, but
Yeah,
the West
Northwestern
Island, that
yeah,
big one,
Yeah.
the big one off the
Yeah.
side.
And it takes, like, you get it every 4 months. So due to that, the stock comes in, it sells out, and then it's gone again. So that's one specific to me. So I'd say fair availability normally, but there are certain parts of the world, including New Zealand, where it's hard to get the product because it's that good and it sells out. So next con, it's not matte. It's simple. If you're looking for matte, this isn't it. It's close, but it's not matte. And the last one,
Right, gotcha.
GW prices. So I think at the moment, a regular size can of this spray paint is something like $35 New Zealand.
$35? Are you serious?
Something like that. But don't quote me on that. I think I just closed my eyes and said, take my money. Yeah, remember, I test this so you didn't have to.
Wow. Although they are, is it the same size as the primer cans?
Yes, so it's a fair size. They're actually, well, let's be specific.
They're good size
there.
cans.
They actually now have an extra large can, and it's not that size. It's the can of their regular size. They're
Right.
pretty good. They're
Okay.
pretty tall, but they're also pretty chunky too. And due to the propellant, you actually use everything that's in there. I feel it's really, really, get your money's worth. So I'm willing to pay it. But it's you pays what you get.
Yeah, that is interesting. $35 gave me an initial knee-jerk reaction, which you may have heard. But when I think about another brand, which we might come on to shortly, they're $12 a can, and they're about half the size. So, yeah.
I would say about a third of the size due to how skinny it is. So we'll talk about that in a minute, probably. Yeah.
Okay.
As well as that, I mean, when we're paying for it, I mean, value is a conversation of balance of quality and price. And quality, when you're talking about spray can, is do I get my money's worth out of this can? In other words, am I getting all the paint or all the varnish out of this can onto my model? There's no point being able to buy a can of spray paint that's $18, thinking it's value, when in actual fact you can't use 1/3 of it. And that has happened to me repeatedly with Army painted products.
Yeah, and we did talk before about the hourly rate of your painting as well. So, if you add up all the hours that you spent painting that army, and times that by X dollars per hour, really the cost of a good can of spray paint is really negligible, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. Let's go on to the next product. And Rex, I'm going to ask you some stuff here. I've used it too, but I know you've been quite prolific in using this. We're going to Tester's Dull Coat.
Yeah, so Tester's Dull Coat. So it comes in 3 different varieties, Tester's brand. And when somebody said to me first, use Tester's, I was... What Testers? What? You want me to get a test pot? So just to be clear, Testers is the brand of the paint, because to me that was just ambiguous. But it comes in 3 varieties, gloss, satin, and matte. And I guess while we're on the topic of conversation, it's probably about half or a third, perhaps, as you say, of the size of the GW1 and the Army painter, and it's about $12 a can where I get it in Australia. So that makes it reasonably expensive.
So basically, I would say that's probably exactly the same price as GW stuff, because in my mind it's a skinnier can and it's a smaller can, so it's probably around a third without looking at the volumes of the can. So don't quote us on that, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, we might do a comparison on the blog. Have a look on the blog for say 16th of May 2019, and I'll put up a comparison, the actual CC ratings of the cans and the sizes and the costs there you go. There's a promise for you, Dan.
Okay, sounds good.
So testers dull coat. So I haven't really had a lot of experience with a lot of different gloss spray, or a lot of different sprays, clear coat sprays. But certainly I've only got good things to say about it. It has a nice, fine misting aerosol spray. It puts it on at about the rate I would expect. It's not overpowering some of the sprays, and not just clear coat sprays, but other sprays as well. It comes out at such a volume that I struggle to to get it on at the right the right coverage level. End up with gluggy miniatures. So yeah, I think it's it seems to be a good product, but I don't really have a lot to draw on comparison wise. Do you want to chat on that, Dan, or shall I go into some pros and cons from my perspective?
No, go into your pros and cons.
So pros for me is that so Testers is a brand that's pretty synonymous with modelers. So the guy with the model aircraft carrier, the planes, the tanks, the 172. World War II stuff. So you'll find that more at a model shop, perhaps less at a gaming store. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, very, very much so, actually. In a lot of places I've heard it's, when I see online, Facebook groups or whatever of playing various games, I find people who are saying they find it difficult to get testers.
Okay, so let's do the cons first, seeing we're on that already. So it can be a little bit difficult, and what I find is I buy all my paints from the local gaming store, but I have to drive for 45 minutes to get to the local hobby store to get my testers. So again, you've got that issue with the with any sort of aerosol product by post. So if you don't have a local source for it, then you may end up with a problem. It's reasonably expensive. I think it's probably in the same realm as the GW stuff. But whether that's a negative or not, we'll come on to. And really, apart from that, it's a small can, but you can always buy two. Really, apart from that, I don't have any other particular negatives about it. I'd consider the gloss level to be just about perfect from my perspective. It's not super gloss. It's not as super matte. It's not as matte as what the Army Painter one is. Would you say, Dan?
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely slightly less super matte than that. Yeah.
So I'd say it sort of sits in that range there, where it's it's certainly not a satin, but it's right about perfect from my perspective. One negative that I will mention is I have 3 cans of this stuff currently on my shelf. The label for the can as to whether it's gloss, dull, or satin is on the lid. It's on the plastic lid. So if you're got a couple out and you're doing some stuff and you don't put the lids back on, or you put them on the wrong spot, there is no label whatsoever identifying whether it's gloss, matte, or satin on the actual can itself. Have you noticed that?
No, I didn't. So that is interesting. So I suggest you get your Sharpie pen or something and write it on before dramas happen.
Yeah, so that's a minor negative. But any other cons, Dan, before we move on to the pros?
So in my experience, this is not as super matte as the Army Painters has said, but I have seen it kill the vibrancy of some colours before. So painting fantasy colours and stuff like 40k and stuff like that, like lots of layered cloaks. And I have seen it kill the layers of basically you're layering up your washes, your glazes and stuff like that. I've seen it kill that and reduce that effectiveness before, and so just something to be aware of there. It looks perfectly good on many things. Lots of three color and up stuff. But yeah, if you're going to be doing a lot of glazes, all that sort of stuff, fine detailing, I certainly wouldn't be pulling it out to put it on top of anything that you're doing a crystal brush for with fantasy colors, as opposed to your khakis and greens and stuff like that, which it is definitely very good at covering.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I did my Fallschirmjäger recently, and I hit it pretty hard with the Tessus dull coat, as I'm fairly well known to do. Probably well, definitely. I think I put a little bit too much on, keep a little bit close, and I found that there was a tiny little accentuation line that I put around the splinter camo. And after the dull, it was reasonably evident before the dull coat. After the dull coat, it was very difficult to see that tiny subtle change that was, I guess, outlining the camo. So yep, I did definitely notice that. So future models with an idea of maybe continuing with that product, I will just add a little bit more white. To that spot so that it shows up well.
Righto. All right. In general, though, I think we're pretty happy with that product, especially if you're using historical colours that aren't vibrant. Actually, yeah, we better be careful with that. Historical colours that maybe aren't red coats and stuff like that. So I guess maybe your drabs, your greens, your World War II sort of colours, World War One colours, I think it'd be ideal for that.
Yeah, so specific pros then for Tessus dull coat. The atomization of the spray is very, very good. It's a very fine, consistent spray. It's a good level. It's not globby. It's not too vaporous. Would be my comment on that. The cans themselves seem to be pretty well made, and there's issues that you've raised with the propellant. I've used a fair few, and I've never had one run out of propellant. There's always plenty left right to the end. You get to use everything that's in the can. Never had any leakages or any problems with that.
Good. All right. So maybe we'll move on to my current favourite. So, Tamiya brand. TS80 is a product number. TS80, it's a spray can, obviously, and it's called the Flat Clear. Flat Clear, TS80, as in, I'm presuming it's Tamiya spray number 80. So pros for this. It gives a really good matte finish without sort of overly matting it, and without the super matte that the Army Painter one does, which can look sort of frosting, especially on the metallics. It doesn't kill the vibrancy of colours underneath. I'm very impressed at how, with your more fantastical sort of colours, your brighter colours, your glazes and stuff like that, it lets those glazes come through more. Of course, there is some diminishing of it. Yeah, but you see the colours that you've spent all that time gradiating and coming through, you can actually see the work you've invested in there. Yeah, very, very good. Not perfect, so once again, I suggest, if you're doing crystal brush or something, you're probably not going to be doing it. Let's face it, the people doing crystal brush and that, and like our Citadel, sort of heavy metal painters, they just don't generally use varnish really, unless it's for an effect. But there we go. Next one is, it gives an acceptable matte seal on metallics. It is not too bad at all. Yes, it's still matte, okay, but it is not overly matte. It doesn't turn them basically grey like the Army Painter one does. And that was a very, very important thing to me. It's been very good. It's a pretty tough finish as well. I've been impressed. I've actually accidentally sort of bent things and stuff like that, and the varnish is holding it together. The paint on the surface has been bent every now and then. So I'm pretty impressed with it. The next thing I'm impressed with, it performs excellently over tufts. So if you're basing up your miniatures, you put your super glue glob on, or your PVA glob on, or whatever you do, and then you put your tufts on. Yep, of course you want to knock back that sort of glossiness underneath it that you can sort of see through your tufts, and it is excellent. You can spray the stuff over the top of it. No frosting on the vegetation, and no globbing on it either. So I'm really, really super impressed because that means I can do it all, put it all on before I spray my miniature. I can do the whole thing all in once, and then spray the miniature and the foliage, whatever, on its base without any sort of problems as well.
Oh, that's interesting. We should come back to that at some point and have a chat about that, Dan. We didn't really talk about that in a huge detail in our painting workflow last time, but yeah, I've got some comments on that, but for another day.
So far, all the other brands of the products I've used that I've tested with it, I've had no chemical problems or nothing like that, and I firmly believe the way it's reacted that I'm not going to get any either. So all the acrylics and stuff I've used in there, I mean, this is designed for scale modelers to use, so putting it over top of enamel products that are dried and all that sort of stuff, with the evaporated mediums and stuff like that, thinners on it. Of course, there's all those things in there, must be very blah, 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 blah. But so far, I haven't had any problems with anything like that, so that's great. I find the price is really acceptable for a small can. So it is a small can. It is roughly the size of a tester's can. Rex is going to do our research for us, so you don't have to.
I'll be there.
But it's generally maybe $4 or $5 less than a can of the comparative size for the testers. So very acceptable price, which therefore makes it it's probably about the sort of third of a can of say Army Painter or GW. So in my mind, that probably makes it cheaper. Okay, that is without seeing the volumes of the cans and stuff like that. So Rex will do that research for us. But next time, it's a Tamiya product. So there's wide model making shop availability. It would be pretty fair to say that model making is a bit more high street availability than maybe wargaming, and so generally you can find more of the Tamiya products out there because it's more acceptable and more referenced on the Tamiya brand of models, scale models, which is pretty huge out there in the marketplace. So it's pretty wide. Again, there is that thing, it's a spray can, so availability to you in Timbuktu, I don't know. However, if you're trying to find it on your high street, it's got pretty good availability. Next one is the spray. So, the Tamiya stuff's got a bit of an odd spray system. I would say it's between something like a GW one and the Army Painter one. It comes out not overly wet, but fairly wet, and it doesn't seem to spray with a hiss like the propellant from the GW one again, from the Citadel one again. That's where this conversations come in with these guys you hear talking about the types of spray paints and that for doing this street art and stuff. So it's something to do with the propellant system, but it's somewhere in between, and it's really good. Yeah, it's a really good spray. You don't hear it all coming out with a hiss and a roar, but it is very, very effective. It gives good coverage. It's not overly wet, but it's still obvious where you have been, so you can rotate your model and continue to go in other places. So yeah, it's very good, and therefore, because it's not overly wet, it will dry fairly quick as well. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Oh, that's interesting, Dan. I hadn't actually heard that I thought you were a Tessa's Dulcate man, but so you've been holding out on me.
Yeah, I've been holding out on you. Just I can go to the same scale model shop here in my hometown here, or the town I'm living in, and I could buy testers, and I can buy Vallejo and Decanted or whatever, or I could buy this Tamiya stuff, and I've gone for the Tamiya stuff, and I have not looked back.
It's interesting, as wargamers, we think that, like everybody with their hobby, you think the world revolves around you, and that your stuff is cutting edge. But you got to look at the marketplace penetration for the modeling hobby has been there and consistent. Maybe it's dropped off a bit, but it's been consistent for a long time. Same with the train set guys as well. These new things that we think are so wonderful sometimes. You look back and the train set guys have been doing it for 20 years.
Yep.
So it is interesting that you have tested and settled on essentially a modeling product. So not all wargamers are modelers, I think it would be fair to say. Some people just want to bash out something, 3 colours, bit of a wash, get it on the table, and they're not too fussed about it. But all modelling guys, you think we're finicky. Those guys are really super finicky, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, the end product of their labours is looking at something. Well, the ideal, I suppose, end product is for them to be able to look at something and see it as realistic as it is, without moving around the battlefield and going, I'm within 6 inches of you, now I'm going to shoot you, whatever the case is. That is the end product, and so they strive for that best photorealistic sort of finish they can get. And that's really what's brought me to this product, is that it keeps the vibrancy in the colours. I've been impressed with it. It gives you that as a best of both. To me, it's the best of all worlds so far that I've found. I'm really happy with it, and what I found interesting is I was on one of the bolt action Facebook groups not too long ago. Somebody asked what's the best one. I put it up there thinking that maybe not too many people did it, but there was echoes all around the interwebs as people also came on and said, I agree. So many people said they agreed with me. So that was great and reassuring, and it's good to see that many more people are doing what we're doing and sort of sticking our heads into these other places to find good products.
Oh, that does sound good. All right. Well, shall we summarise all of that, Dan? Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, definitely. Look, so far, I mean, the trusted brands that I really find all the time, Army Painter, the Citadel stuff, the Testers, the Tamiya. Look, I've settled on one that I'm really happy with. I can get it easy. I'm really happy with products and stuff like that. I really hope that people have a listen, and I really hope that we've saved somebody some gnashing of teeth. There are real application issues around, or considerations rather, around humidity, heat, cold, stuff like that. That's really going to affect your results. So I actually recommend that you go to the terrain tutor, who talks in depth about varnishes, and so much as the chemical things and applying them all. I think we've sort of gone specific into in talking about what ones we recommend at the moment and trying them so that you don't have to, so to speak. But he goes into some real chemical reasons why, about the humidity and cold and stuff and how it affects it. But I recommend you listen to that or have a watch that YouTube video, because it goes into much more depth than we just want to repeat on here. I mean, why try and reinvent the wheel when he's done such a good job of it there? But those are the brands that we've settled on, and I hope that it has done you all some good. We'd love to hear your feedback. So please give it to us, and if you used one of these based on what we've said, then let us know.
Fantastic, Dan. Well, in some ways, quite a dry subject. A whole podcast just dedicated to varnishes. But in my opinion, that's the final icing on the cake of something that you've spent forever and ever on. And as I tell my wife pretty regularly, these miniatures are going to last me a lifetime, dear. So it's okay that I spend good money on them and lots of time.
Yep, and it's so true. So true. This probably the final word is that if you're using the same brand of spray can as your primer, make sure you read the label at 2 a.m. as you're finishing off a commission project, or as you're about to jump into the car to drive to that tournament or event. Don't pick up the product. Think it's your spray of varnish. Point it at your models, and proudly spray your models that are completely finished with your black primer. Don't do that, everyone. It's painful. Yeah.
Righto, Dan. That's enough chit-chat on clear coat for one day. Thanks very much for your huge expertise in that area. I'll be looking into your favourite product shortly. But to do that, I got to go. I got to paint some minis.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, everyone.
Bye.
Stay classy, Tobruk.
What do you think?
Think? We must have close to 1,000 casualties up to now. You want me to get word off the ships, have them come in, start picking us up?
You really think it's that bad, huh?
I don't see what else we can do. We can't get up this hill. We're hung up on it. If we don't get off this beach, we won't have any division left.
What? These are our men, Tom. You think we brought them in here to let part of them die and ask the rest of them to turn tail? Hell no, we're not leaving. We're gonna get up that hill. Find me somebody who can speak with the Rangers.
Yes, sir.
Now look, back down the beach here on the right, there's a gully.
Yeah, with a heavily defended concrete roadblock, 20 feet thick, machine gun nests on both sides.
But if we can blow our way through that
We
road...
did it 3 times. We didn't get close to
I
it.
know 3 times are not enough. We're gonna hit it again. Can you find me some engineers?
We're all around you.
I mean engineers with equipment still working.
And you don't want me to radio the ships?
No, damn it! We need Bangalore torpedoes, bazookas, mortars, wire cutters, and every man that can stand. Now pass the word, will you?
Okay, Norm.
Now listen to me, all of you. You guys gotta snap out of it. We're getting off of here. We're going inland.
What about weapons, General? Most of my men lost everything they had. They're not afraid to fight, but they gotta have something to fight with.
Strip the dead and the wounded. Pick up anything that'll shoot. I don't have to tell you the score. You all know it. Only 2 kinds of people are gonna stay on this beach. Those that are already dead and those that are gonna die. Now get off your butts. You guys are the fighting 29th. Okay, run me up the hill, son.